Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name's Colin, semicolon, Brez. I think you get the drill at this point. Whatever you want to call me works for me. Today, we have another farm highlight video. And in this one, we're specifically going to be talking about 2x4 farming, how it works, where to do it, why you should do it, or why you can do it, and kind of just cover all aspects of 2x4 farming. So first things first, I think it's important to highlight what 2x4 farming is and why people do 2x4 farming as opposed to just a regular group. So 2x4 farming essentially means there's two groups, and in each group there are four people in their group. So if you have a full 2x4 farm going, you would have 8 players within the farm. And the reason this works is the way Blizzard's looting system works is if a player tags a mob, then everybody in that player's group will be able to loot that mob up to 5 people. Now, if you have only 4 people in your group and somebody in the other group of four that you're doing this 2x4 farm with also damages that mob before they die, then that player, by extension, will also be able to loot that mob. And because that player in the other group is able to loot the mob, their whole party will as well. So essentially, what it ends with is you have 8 total characters that are able to loot off of a single mob as opposed to just 5 if you had just a 5-man group doing the farming. So there's more opportunity when it comes to loot. But then another huge benefit to 2x4 farming is going to be the hyperspawn aspect of it. So essentially, Blizzard's system, I guess, I don't know what else you would call it, uh, tries to have a certain amount of mobs in a zone at any given time. So if you and your 2x4 farm group are constantly killing every single type of mob within a certain area, Blizzard's system is going to essentially start spawning those mobs much quicker than typical spawn rates would be. And so if you have a full 2x4 farm running and you're killing mobs, new mobs are going to spawn constantly, and it's just kind of a never ending train of always having mobs to attack and loot. And it essentially is able to just speed up the standard farming process of all the different materials that you might farm through a 2x4. So some of the examples we're going to look at today are going to be for different rousings, different cloths, BOE gear, things along those lines. So essentially, if you're farming those things by joining a 2x4 farm group, you're able to accomplish it much quicker. So that kind of leads us into the second topic, which is going to be what characters to do this farm on, and how to get into groups. So number one, when you are looking for a 2x4 farm group, typically groups are going to be consisted of one brewmaster monk, and the reason that they would use a brewmaster monk is because the brewmaster monk has the totem that they can put down that will automatically taunt all mobs within a certain area if you're in combat with them, I believe. So brewmaster monk for that totem, and then I do occasionally see some groups that have like one or two DPS classes along with it. If there are DPS classes in your group, then what class they are doesn't really matter. Just preferably something that can kill mobs as quick as possible. So I see a lot of demon hunters, ret paladins, but really anything should work. But then outside of that, you really the rest of the group is going to need to consist of classes that can easily pull mobs to the area. So for one particular example is hunters. So hunters and druids actually, I think, are for the most part the best classes to use for this style of farming, and you'll have the most luck getting into groups if you are a hunter or a druid. um, so hunters are extremely good because you have this ability here called barrage, and this ability is obtained through the hunter talent tree, the very bottom node. And this ability essentially is just going to fire a out in a cone in front of you, and any mobs that are in front of you and within 40 yards are going to take damage by this barrage. So it's a very quick and easy way to just pull a ton of mobs right to you. And just to give an example, here is me using the ability. Well, I'm actually not in combat with any of these things, so it didn't do any damage. But in most cases, it is going to. My apologies. It doesn't even matter that I'm in combat. I don't know why it didn't work here, but in most cases, it is just going to damage everything out in that cone, like you just saw from all of those bullets being fired from my gun. So it's just a very easy way to pull a bunch of mobs to your character at once. Another option is also going to be druids. In that case, you would want to be a balanced druid, so you can just spam sunfire, starfire, things like that. One benefit to hunter, and it kind of depends on the type of farm you're doing, but there is one 2x4 farm here in Dragonflight that this is extremely beneficial with. And it would be a rousing frost farm, which I will show here in just a few minutes. But by being a beast mastery hunter, you actually have the ability to tame exotic pets. This pet right here, it's a water strider, is considered an exotic pet, so you would have to be beast mastery in order to tame it. But the cool thing about taming this pet is the pet ability that it gives you is called Surface Trot, which essentially just gives you water walking. Now, this does break if you take any damage, but it's castable and it's repeatedly castable, and there's no cooldown other than like the global cooldown. So you can really just kind of put that on your bar and then just constantly keep it refreshed on yourself if you need to, so that you constantly have water walking. And like I mentioned, for one farm in particular, that is extremely important and super beneficial. But the overall, in regards to characters that you're playing for 2x4 farming, you're going to have the easiest time finding a group if you are a hunter or a druid. If you are a brewmaster monk, you could still get into a group. It's just going to be a little bit harder. And same with DPS, because if you think about it, if there's eight characters in a 2x4 farm group, there's one that's going to be the brewmaster, there might be one or two that's going to be DPS, and then the rest of the slots are going to be for polars. And so if you are a polar, that's going to be your highest chance of getting into a group. And then lastly, in terms of actually finding a group, there's several different methods. So there are different Discord servers. I'm sure that you could find group content or group 2x4 farming in. But you also can just use the group finder, and you can go to pre-made groups and then custom, and you'll see a lot of different options. So like this 2x4 Murloc farm is one. Um, you'll Most of these will have the 2x4 in the title. So as long as you see that and it's something that you're wanting to do, you can go ahead and get set up to, or you can sign up to that 2x4 farm group and hope that you get invited. Um, Now there's couple last things that are extremely important to kind of maximizing 2x4 farming, and that is going to be the professions that you have. So my recommendation would be is on whatever character that you want to do your 2x4 farming on, I would recommend getting tailoring and enchanting. So for tailoring, the important thing that you're going to want from this, number one, is going to be getting your dragon scale vestments, because you have a increased chance to find cloth. Now that's specifically off of Dragonkin. I don't know that all of the 2x4 farms include Dragonkin, but you want to get this. I mean, just additional chances at cloth is always important. But I will say that if you don't have this, it's probably not that big of a deal, especially if you're not doing a 2x4 farm that includes Dragonkin, then this is not going to be relevant to you whatsoever. But what is going to be extremely relevant under the tailoring mastery tree is going to be cloth collection. You want to get 50 points into cloth collection. And this is essentially going to increase your chances of finding cloth on humanoids by 50% once you have all the points into the tree. And then even the better part is that the amount of cloth that you find will be increased by getting points into this tree. And then lastly, you'll be able to find wilder cloth bolts off of humanoids in the Dragon Isles. So that's really nice when it comes to different crafting things. If you do a decent amount of 2x4 farming, you're just going to have a ton of wilder cloth bolts that you can either sell those raw, or you can convert them into some something else. Craft something with them if you want. So that's going to be thing number one for tailoring profession. And then for enchanting, this is also going to be really important depending on the type of farm you're doing. Under Insight of the Blue, you would want to get 40 points into Primal Extraction. So what this will do is this will increase your chance of finding a rousing by 40%. So if you're doing a rousing frost farm, again, this is going to increase the amount or the chance of finding a rousing off of the mobs that you're killing by 40%. So that also is going to be immensely important to the profitability when you are doing 2x4 farming. So now that we've kind of reviewed the setup on how to get started into 2x4 farming, let's take a look at some of the specific farms within 2x4 farming that you can do to make a profit. All right, so our first 2x4 farming location we are going to take a look at is in the Azure Span, all the way over to the west side here, just above the Iskara town. Um, and you're going to be farming Murlocs. So the best way to actually approach this farm is to have the 2x4 group kind of based right here. So this is where you would put the monk, and essentially the pullers and everybody is just going to I'm about to die here. I am not equipped for this. Oh shit. Okay, we're good. We're good. So the pullers are basically just going to be pulling all of the Murlocs. Uh, all of the Murlocs in this area. So these guys around over here. And then basically just this lower set of pools right here. So you just pull all these Murlocs, and they will be hyper spawning, especially if you have a 2x4 farm group. And what are you going to be looting? So you will be going for this frostbitten wilder cloth. You'll also get tattered wilder cloth. You're going to get a decent amount of raw gold, and you'll also get Dragon Isle supply caches. So you can use those Dragon Isle supplies for other things that require Dragon Isles supplies. Like for example, just like a Quacky. If you craft Quacky the pet through engineering, you can use all the Dragon Isle supplies that you're farming here to buy the Quacky modulator thing and get more of those crafted. But the raw gold from this farm, I believe, is right around 10,000 gold per hour. And you're additionally going to be getting all of this frostbitten wilder cloth that you can sell as raw frostbitten wilder cloth on the auction house, or if you have a tailor that has unraveling spec, you can unravel the frostbitten wilder cloth into rousing frost, and then with those rousing frost you can do anything you want, whether it's selling them, crafting with them, whatever you want to do. But yeah, this is going to be spot number one for 2x4 farming. And next we are going to check out a couple of spots in Emerald Dream. Okay, so now we are in the Emerald Dream, and there are several different spots that you can do 2x4 farming here. So spot number one we are going to take a look at, and they're actually kind of all in this upper northern area of Emerald Dream. But first one is right here on this island. You can either do it on this island, or I do see some groups do their 2x4 farming from right around here instead. But those are the two spots that you would essentially plant the monk in any DPS that you have. And then in terms of mobs that you're pulling, they're going to be all of these guys down here, coming across, getting all of these guys. Sometimes I do see people try to pull these over as well, but they de-aggro pretty easily. And then around all of these guys right here. So basically everything around this island and then up through here as well. So these mobs are going to drop a bunch of different cloth. So it's just going to be like wilder cloth, tattered, wilder cloth bolts. But then you're also going to get rousing frost and rousing fire. So this is a decent. I'm sorry, not rousing frost, rousing earth and rousing fire. So this is a decent farm to do. To be totally honest with you, I don't see a whole lot of groups doing this particular area anymore. They have kind of switched to more rousing fire centric farms. But another awesome thing that you can loot from this farm is Dragonflight BOEs. So I do have some random BOEs in my inventory right now. And to be totally upfront and honest with all of you, um, BOE farming in Dragonflight is really dying down. BOEs are not nearly as much in demand as they used to be. But one thing that can be extremely lucrative is if you loot a BOE that has tertiary stats, but particularly speed on it. A piece with plus speed is gonna sell for a lot more than just the base version of that piece that doesn't have the speed on it. But you can still try to sell all of the BOE gear. Worst case scenario, maybe you just vendor it or um, disenchant potentially, depending on what you're wanting to do. I unfortunately don't have a estimate on gold per hour from this farm, but I have done this particular farm a lot back in the day and made some decent gold off of it. And I think it's important to highlight that some of these, like a lot of 2x4 farming is not going to be as lucrative as um, different things that you can do in the game for gold making. But one of the benefits of 2x4 farming is going to be um, the fact that you can take those materials and kind of upcycle them. So, like the rousings, like I do a lot of crafting, Dragonflight crafting that require different rousings. So I can take those rousings and use them for my crafting as opposed to just selling raw rousings or converting them to awakens and selling raw awakens. And so that can kind of increase your gold per hour. It might not seem like you're making a whole lot, maybe like 10, 15K an hour doing the raw gold farm. But by the time you're done converting all of the materials that you've gathered into, like again, like upcycling them, crafting them into something that might take the 10 to 15K an hour and maybe make it like 20K an hour. Um, so that's just a kind of one thing to keep in mind with these 2x4 farms. So spot number 2 here in the Emerald Dream is going to be right down here. So at this spot, this is going to be the rousing fire focused 2x4 farm. And essentially everything that you're going to be farming is just these fire elemental dudes. So you'll pull them all up here. Um, Basically everything that you can see within just this area is what you're going to pull for the fire elementals, and you would want to have your group staged probably somewhere right around here to aggro everything up. So that would be spot number 2. Now here you could probably get like 1,000 rousing fire per hour, maybe maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but you can get a solid number of rousing fires just from that spot alone. And then one last solid spot in the Emerald Dream is going to be right over here. And now this final spot is kind of focused on BOEs. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see a whole lot of groups doing this particular farm anymore. But if you sit right here on this little island, you can just pull everything right here, and you're just going to again get a lot of BOEs, or hopefully at least. So the last 2x4 farm we are going to look at is for Rousing Frost, and that is going to be back in the Azure Span. So let me cruise on over there, and we will have a look at that farm. All right, so for our final spot, we are back into the Azure Span. This time we are right next to Camp Antonitis in this frozen lake area. So we're kind of on the cusp of frozen and not frozen, I suppose. But this is the Rousing Frost Farm. This is a very popular 2x4 farm right now. And essentially, how it works is your group can either sit on this piece of ice here, or you can sit on this piece of ice here. But essentially, you are going to farm or pull all of these calving elemental dudes from around here. So this is kind of important to what I was saying earlier about having the water walking pet, because this is the relevant spot for it. Because you also want to try to pull all of these elemental guys from over here as well. Um, and this is a very solid spot to do Rousing Frost. So I want to kind of highlight why doing these 2x4 farming can be lucrative. Number one, um, it's a pretty mindless thing, right? Like some gold making methods, like if you're spamming dungeons back to back, that requires you to run the route of the dungeon, pay attention to where you're running, that kind of thing. And with some of these farms, you literally can kind of just, for the most part, stand in one spot, spin around, and just do damage. So it's a pretty mindless thing to do. Plus, 2x4 farming is completely raw gold. It takes zero investment to make any of the gold that you're making within these professions. So let's just say, for example, I had an inscriptionist that could craft inks and I could make 30,000 gold um, in sales an hour by crafting inks. Well, the thing that I'm not considering into that is the amount of gold it took me to craft all of those inks. So maybe it's not actually 30,000 gold profit per hour. Maybe it's only 20,000 gold profit per hour by crafting the inks because 10K I spent on materials, or maybe the numbers are different. But 2x4 farming is completely raw. You are not having to spend a cent other than maybe the initial spending to get the professions leveled up and get the knowledge points. Otherwise, it's just spending time doing the farm. There's not any sort of investment, and you can maximize what you're doing with the materials. Like I've mentioned previously, instead of just selling the raw rousing frost, maybe you convert it into awakens and then craft those awakens into files of tepid versatility, and now you're just maximizing those rousing frosts and making them go further. And especially with, like, when you consider multi-craft procs and resourcefulness procs by using your own materials to craft. If you looted 100 rousing frost, or let's say you looted 1,000 rousing frost and converted them into 100 awakened frost, and then you go through and craft 50 files of tepid versatility with that, you're already, just not even considering uh resourcefulness procs. You're making money, you're getting more value out of those rousing frost than if you were to just sell them raw, because they're going through a crafting process. But then if you also factor in resourcefulness, let's say you get 10 resourcefulness procs of awakens out of those 50 crafts. um I mean, those are just awakens that essentially came out of nowhere, right? So that's why doing some of these farms can be beneficial. Are these the best gold farms? Absolutely not. Are there better farms? Absolutely. Are there different 2x4 farms that I haven't covered yet, or am going to cover in this video? Also, absolutely. There's a super good one with skinning right now. So that would be something to look into as well. That is something I am going to be looking into. Um, so yeah, I hope that this has motivated you, given you potentially some other options that you can do for gold making. I'm gonna get away from these fellows because they loud. But hopefully this has given you some other ideas for what you can do with gold making. 2x4 farming is an easy thing to do. And also, it's probably going to be something that we're doing on stream every once in a while. So if you're curious, you can check out my stream. I do stream on Twitch and YouTube, twitch.tv/ semicolon 23. Um, but yeah, check out these farms if you want to check out the stream, potentially participate in a group farm on stream. That'd be wonderful. But otherwise, I hope you found this video beneficial and are able to apply this to your gold making. Let me know if you have any feedback. I'd love to hear how this goes for you. If you have any issues, let me know. You can join Discord. I have some tools available for viewers in Discord. Don't have to pay anything to have access to them, such as gold making spreadsheets, TSM profiles, that kind of thing. Anyways, hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching. See ya.